Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Live Free, Ride Free. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horse Boy and The Long Ride Home. Before I jump in with today's guest, I want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do here, please give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really, really helps us to make the progress. To find out about our certification courses, online video libraries, books, and other courses, please go to rupertisaacson.com. So now let's jump in. Okay, today we're looking at alternative medicine, and we're looking at the sort of new generation where technology meets medicine, biotechnology, medical technology. Most of us are used to thinking of alternative medicine as medical practices like Ayurveda and so on. But in recent decades, and increasingly in an accelerated way, there's been a great upsurge in the understanding of vibration and frequency as medicine. And many companies, especially in Europe, creating devices that are now being adopted by doctors and other types of practitioners worldwide. And so it's really worth taking a dive. So I've got with me Har Hari Khalsa, who's a doctor, a chiropractic doctor from Los Angeles, with us. Har Hari, thanks for coming on. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm really honored to be here, first of all. Thank you so much for spending the time to listen and hear me. I've been a chiropractor since 1988. I've been in the holistic realm, with yoga, meditation, vegetarian lifestyle since 1980. So it's about 45 years now, actually. I started when I was young, when I was 20. And so I've always been, very open to holistic methods of healing since I was 20, basically. My history is I was kind of like a daredevil when I was a kid. And I ended up, by the time I was 20, I was in chronic pain from a lot of different skiing accident, cliff diving, getting hit by trucks, all different kind of things happening. But bottom line was, by the time I was 20, I was racked in pain. And the medical doctors told me that I had the spine of a 70-year-old at 20. And I was like, oh my God, that's that good.
7-year-old or a 70-year-old?
I was 20 and I had the spine of a 70-year-old.
Okay.
When I was 20. So I was like, okay, what do I do? So the medical doctors, I didn't know anything about holistic medicine at that point. All I knew was I went to a medical doctor maybe once or twice my whole life. And I didn't even know anything about chiropractic. And so I just did what the medical doctors told me to do, go to a physical therapist, take drugs, so I did that for like a year and really nothing changed. I was still in pain. And what happened was I was in a yoga class and I told the yoga teacher, I said, listen, it's hard for me to do the yoga because I'm in so much pain. What do you have? What can you suggest? He said, well, you should go to see a chiropractor. And I'm like, well, what is a chiropractor? I didn't even know. Chiropractic is only used by about less than 10% of the population in the United States, probably worldwide too. I mean, it's not well known. It's been actively suppressed for probably over 100 years by the medical profession, unfortunately, because we're a direct threat to their livelihood, right? Rightfully so, because a lot of chiropractic actually does work. So in my case, it did work. It helped me get out of the pain I was in. And then that's kind of what launched me into the idea of even being a chiropractor. I was on the path of actually going to medical school. And at a very young age, I was working in biotech. I actually worked at a company that made heart valves when I was 16. So I was very science oriented. I really was passionate about medicine. And I really thought I wanted to be a medical doctor because I didn't know any different. But once I met the chiropractor, it was like light bulbs went off. I was like, oh my God, this is what I wanted. So it made a whole lot of sense to me. And at the time, my chiropractor was also a naturopath. So he was working with homeopathy and doing cranial work. Pretty, even for chiropractic, he was exotic back then. And so I was totally blown away by that experience. And it really propelled me into the whole world of holistic healing. And so I've, been practicing, like I said, since 1988 as a chiropractor. And I've studied pretty much consistently. I've never stopped studying ever since I got out of school. School is just to get you started, but if you're a true healer, you're studying and researching your entire life. So I literally have been studying and researching this field of holistic medicine for 44 years. And that's how I kind of came to where I'm at now. Yeah.
So chiropractic, how is that different from osteopathy? Can you give us the 1, 2, 3 on that?
Okay, so they're like parallel profession. Well, the original. Okay, so there's a big difference about current, but the original osteopaths and chiropractors were doing manual therapy, adjusting the spine with their hand, slightly different flavor, different techniques, but basically the idea was to unblock the vertebra so you had proper nerve flow, your body works better, right? That's the nuts and bolts of it. But what happened over the years was the osteopaths went more into mainstream medicine and started, incorporating drugs and surgery. And now they're more like at the status of, say, a orthopedic doctor, where the chiropractors stayed in the realm of drug-free medicine, but still focusing on manual therapy. I would say those are like the overarching big picture type thing. But, within those professions, you do have holistic practitioners in both. Like, for example, Dr. Mercola. I don't know if you know who that is.
Dr. Who, sorry?
Mercola, Dr. Joe Mercola.
Tell me about Dr. Joe Mercola. No, tell me about him.
Well, he's probably the best known holistic doctor in the world. He was during
Dr.
the
Joe
COVID
Mercola.
era, he was the number one banned doctor on the internet. They took him down. He was one of the first guys they took down, but he has a huge following. You have to search for him though, because they banned him off the internet. So, but he's an osteopath, but he's deep, very deep. He's one of my mentors. I follow him daily. He, has a newsletter that he puts out every day about different topics, but he's an osteopath, right? So there's a lot of crossover, but I'd say, in general, it's the same concept, but with different flavor.
Got it. I'm looking up Dr. Joe Mercola.
Yeah.
Take control of your health. Physician, 70 years old. This is just for the listeners so that they know. I quickly jumped on my phone. Here we go. Dr. Joseph Mercola is a physician and New York Times bestselling author. He was voted the ultimate wellness game changer by the Huffington Post and has been featured in, blah, blah, blah. His mission is to transform the traditional medical paradigm in the United States into one in which the root cause of disease is treated rather than the symptoms. In addition, he aims to expose corporate and government fraud and mass media hype that often sends people down an unhealthy path. Yeah, that'll get you crucified for sure.
Yeah, no.
But he seems to be doing all right up there on the cross.
Yeah.
I've just also, while you were talking, because you were mentioning, the history of chiropractic, being over 100 years old, and I looked that up, and it's indeed, I see that it's indeed true, which I didn't know. I just want to, for the listeners, just give you a couple of paragraphs of this because I think it helps to provide context. So I'm on Wikipedia. The history of chiropractic began in 1895 when Daniel David Palmer of Iowa performed the first chiropractic adjustment on a partially deaf janitor, Harvey Lillard. While Lillard was working without his shirt on in Palmer's office, Lillard bent over to empty the trash can, and Palmer noticed that Lillard had a vertebra out of position. He asked Lillard what happened, and Lillard replied, I moved the wrong way and I heard a pop in my back, and that's when I lost my hearing. Palmer, who was also involved in many other natural healing philosophies, had Lillard lie face down on the floor and proceeded with the adjustment. The next day, Lillard told Palmer, "I can hear the racket on the streets." This experience led Palmer to open a school of chiropractic 2 years later. Reverend Samuel H. Weed coined the term chiropractic by combining the Greek words chiro, hand, and practikos, doing or action. Okay, interesting. So, of course, I've gone to chiropractors in my life, and usually I've gone for an adjustment, but I wouldn't say I've gone for any kind of health condition. And I wouldn't say that I've noticed a uptick in my physical health or mental health either way, other than the relief of tension. But do you think I should have? Or does that just mean that maybe I was doing fine and there wasn't anything really that much to fix? Or what's your take on that?
Well, that's a really deep question you're asking, because the thing is back then, back in the 1800s, when Dee was alive, there was a lot less toxicity and electromagnetic stress on the planet. We didn't have.
How did you know I was that old? So,
Well, I did.
Don't I look great?
But the thing is, like, back then, we think about it. Like, right now, we have over 80,000 environmental toxins that are in our body as we speak. Every human on the planet has 80,000 environmental pollutants in our body: heavy metals, organic volatile compounds, forever chemicals, nanoplastics. There's over 80,000 of them that are in our body. So those things are disruptors of hormones. It interferes with mitochondrial function. It's causing so much havoc within our cells that a chiropractic adjustment 100 years ago could cure something like deafness or cancer or whatever, just because you're releasing the pressure on the nerve. The problem now that we face, what you said is a perfect analogy, is that chiropractic adjustment now is only going to relieve maybe 10% of your interference, because now you've got electromagnetic stress and all these environmental factors that are shutting down and inhibiting your proper cell function.
There's a question that I often wonder with that. When one reads, obviously I'm a journalist, so, I always go, whenever I read anything, including anything I write or anything I say. But one frequently has a picture presented of, this is sort of the most, toxic time we've ever lived.
Mhm.
Is it? I remember, for example, as a boy in London, the pea super fogs that don't exist anymore before the Clean Air Act came in. And I remember people had tuberculosis. I remember people had various types of conditions. There's polio. There were other things as well.
Do you know the word polio? This is something I just. They changed the definition. So now when you get Guillain-Barré syndrome, that syndrome that you get?
I do not know. Guillain-Barré.
Well, anyway, bottom line is they changed the definition.
Well, that's handy.
People still get polio. They just don't call it that anymore.
We had that with a nuclear reactor in England in the 80s, which had a leak. So it was called Windscale. So the government solved the problem by changing the name of the reactor to Sellafield, and it worked.
I mean, the tricks they play on us are so bad.
But nonetheless, I remember people's health being severely compromised back then. And then, I spent a lot of time in the parts of the world like, India or say Turkey in the winter, where you get, coal-fired stuff, in the way, like you go to Delhi right now, like massive, massive pollution. But that was Europe. And that certainly was the United States in any industrialized city, even certainly 100 years ago. So people were dropping like flies from all sorts of toxicities. And of course, things weren't controlled. Foods were not controlled. People were taking all kinds of terrible things and dying from them and getting diseases from them. So are things actually more toxic now, or are we just more aware of it? Sorry, say that again.
Yeah, the thing is that back then there was maybe 20 things, right? 20. Now we've got 80,000 That's a huge difference.
Mm.
And that are forever chemicals. That means they're not going away. They're in the environment. They're circulating through.
And
they're
yet we
invisible.
live longer and our bodies last longer.
Right. And
than
the
they did
reason
back
is
then.
because we got better hygiene. Everything in our lives are improved since 100 years ago, mainly because of hygiene, sewage waste treatment.
Penicillin.
There's a lot of things we've done right,
Mm-hmm.
but over 50% of the population is suffering from some sort of chronic or autoimmune disease. That's not normal. That's not normal.
That I'll give you. Also, for me, I'm lucky because the lifestyle I live, I have a whole parallel career where I train horses and we are constantly, hours and hours and hours a day out there in nature doing that. So if I go for a chiropractic adjustment, it's because, something happened. But in general, I'm moving, I'm limber, I'm out in nature, I'm breathing in a lot of poo particles from herbivores, which is good for
those are probably healthy for
No,
you.
I'm told that's very good for my gut bacteria and so on and so on. There's been an interesting study on dairy farmers in the Netherlands who don't seem to get cancer, even though they're chain smokers. And it seems to come down, from what I read, to the inhalation over decades of cow poo.
So they're getting all that healthy microbiome.
Indeed.
That's awesome.
So I'm a believer. I believe in poo. But those who know me know how much I believe in poo. But so it's interesting to me because we often get this picture presented to us of, oh my God, we're in crisis. And if you look back at every generation for as long as written records have, you'll see, oh my God, we're in crisis. However, perhaps what's true is that the crises change. I have a very good friend whose dad had if you've got a problem, get a bigger one. So maybe, but that doesn't mean, and I'm not being flippant, but I want to raise these questions because I do think that one of the ills of our age is people perceiving themselves as unwell when they might or might not be. And that I think is sometimes as big an issue as people actually being unwell because of lifestyle. It's a funny, strange line that people have to tread now. What do you think about that? Because we get so much negative
Well, I mean,
stuff through the media.
you have your epigenetic stressors, which are the things that are environmental, like what we're talking about, but also personal history, trauma that we store in our cell memory, right? And that's not only personal, it's also transpersonal. So, what you're saying, like, people are unwell, they don't know why, and a lot of times it's not because of them. It could be because of the group think. When we were in the midst of COVID, the group think was very, very demented and weird. You got to wear a mask. You got to, it was all based on lies, so we're being pre-programmed societally to believe a lie. I never believed it from day one, but I'm just one little guy, but most of the population of the world bought into the lie of COVID, which was, you got to wear a mask and 6 feet of this and this and this. It was just made up. We know now it's all fraud, but back then everybody took it real seriously because it was like a life-threatening thing. And you're right, like, we're always being presented with the next, dangerous, and it think, the way I perceive it, for me anyway, it's like, you have to live your life like you're Neo in the Matrix. Like, you got to realize, first of all, you're in a matrix and the matrix is there to control you. And your job is to break chains of that control on the physical and the emotional and the mental, all three.
Has it not always been so? Here I go again. So if you were in where I'm sitting now, I'm interviewing you from Germany. If we'd been sitting here 85 years ago, if I'd been sitting here 85 years ago, there would have been a groupthink going on that said, do some very, very, very bad and reckless things as a nation and believe in this wholeheartedly, go off and commit a bunch of atrocities. And then destroy yourselves. And everyone went, Heil Hitler. So it's not the first time
No, that's
this has
not.
happened. We can look east.
We're herd animals. We're not
Yeah.
a whole lot different than elk or deer, or in a sense.
Let's go take back the Holy Land. 12th century France. Or let's go make Europe under Islam. The Ottoman Empire or the 8th century. So those group thinks for conquest and sort of negative, the Mongols. Let's kill everybody. We kill everybody from the Pacific to the Mediterranean every 2 generations. So those types of negative group thinks have been around for a bit.
Oh, yeah.
Are we any different now, really?
I think we're just more sophisticated with it, and we have way more input through our antenna. Our brain is an antenna, and we're getting massively way more data coming in than we've ever had in the history of the planet. Like, they talk about AI. We are AI. Our brains are hooked in. We don't need a chip in our brain. We already have the internet, and we're hooked in planetarily. Just the fact that you and me are sitting here talking. I'm in Los Angeles. You're in Sherman. I mean, it's happening all over the planet.
Yeah. But that's an essentially good thing, because here we are disseminating information that for well-being, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
These things are always seem to be balanced out. I'm only raising these questions because I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm a great believer in all of the movements within alternative medicine, because I myself have seen, experienced, and delved into many of them. And I also know, that to some degree, the history of the American, Physicians Association, and how that monopoly was deliberately created in the sort of 1920s and so on, and what medicine looked like before that and what it's looked like since, and so on and so on. So it's been it's an evolution, and that I do want to get into this. One thing more though, I want to ask you about you. So you are called Har Hari Khalsa, and you're sitting opposite me wearing a Sikh turban, but I don't think you were born a Sikh. Now, and Sikhism is a very interesting and very specific philosophy and way of life, as you know. So me growing up in London, and, the Commonwealth and the aftermath of the empire and all of that, and then having spent quite a lot of time in India myself, I'm somewhat familiar with Sikhism. And I know that Khalsa is a high, I think you can't really use the word caste within Sikhism, because as far as I know, Sikhs don't believe in caste.
Khalsa is just it's like Smith or Jones. It's a common.
No. The Khalsas were a very, very influential and highborn clan.
Yeah, well,
in the Punjab and in Bengal.
It's not about birth.
They were sort of at the top of
birth. It's not a birth-oriented thing. It is a conscious commitment to consciousness, like to pure. Khalsa means pure ones, right? So it's basically living a pure lifestyle. When I started, that meant being a vegetarian, doing yoga, meditating every day, but purity, basically that's what Khalsa means. And I think it transcends religion in the sense of, I think the thing that differentiates the Sikhs from every other religion is, technically Sikh is not a religion. Sikh means student of the truth, right? And so that's why I embraced it at a very young age, because I recognize a lot of falsehood and lack of integrity in the modern religion. I was born Jewish, and I respect the religions, but for me, it wasn't enough. I wanted to have a much deeper spiritual experience of spirituality, which you get from doing yoga and meditating. So, and
could one not find that within the mystic traditions of any religion, though?
Yeah, exactly. But it takes a conscious
Sufism,
Yeah, well, all of these things, it doesn't. Okay, we differentiate it like Sufism, Sikhism, but in reality, it's being present in the present moment with your breath, with your mind, with your body, with your intention. We put different labels on that, right? But it's meditation is in action. It's not a static thing where you're sitting there on a pillow and just emptying your mind. It's something it's your life. It's how you live.
Right. But I think a lot of, say, Benedictines would say the same thing, or
Sure.
Sufis or whatever. So
Yeah.
why then pick a particular
Well, okay, so that's a
part
really
the
good,
way you have to wear
that's like a
clothes
personal,
and
okay,
so on?
so the question you have there, and this is going to sound very bizarre for some of your people, but I'll just tell you what happened.
Mhm.
When I was 19 years old, I saw Sikhs walking on the road, and I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, it just kind of, my brain just went into like some kind of spinning. I don't even understand. Like, I just was like, whoa. And then what happened with me is I started taking yoga classes with a turban Westerner, right, in college at University of Oregon in Eugene. And I started having these prophetic dreams uh, while I was, in the midst of doing all this yoga. And basically what had happened is I started having a past life recall of being with these Sikh gurus in India. And I didn't know who they were or why I was having these dreams. And I'm like, what the heck? Because I was seeing clearly these visions of these historical events with the Sikh gurus in my dream. And I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't know who they were. And then I found out later who these people were and what the vision was. And I'm like, oh my God. I was in shock. I was like, I was a Sikh in my past. I mean, if you believe in past life, I don't know. It's a collective remembering, individual, whatever. Point is that I had a clear vision of being with these gurus, historic. And so I happened to be at the same time Yogi Bhajan, who lived here in California. He was teaching, and there was a huge movement of Kundalini yoga and Sikhism. And it's like, you know what? I'm supposed to be here. It was just something I knew I needed to be. And I ended up living in an ashram in Boulder, Colorado. I actually went to school at the University of Colorado. And I lived in the ashram for like 4 years and took up the Sikh lifestyle, which, you know, if you talk, if there is many Sikhs on the planet, that's how many lifestyles there are of Sikh. There's six. Basically, I have my own version of it, let's say. So,
What's interesting is if you were having those prophetic dreams, it's very interesting to hear you talk about that. And that kind of perhaps answers my question of, if you're looking towards the mystic, which is pan-religious or even outside of religion, but religions can certainly have their ways of expressing it. So I was thinking, well, why choose that one? I think you've answered that very well. But something which I find interesting about Sikhism is it's so specific. Like the history of it, it's 15th century. So right when, the Medicis are beginning to flower in Florence, and, the reconquest of Spain is happening, and the Wars of the Roses are going on in England. And, we think of that as the kind of high medieval right at the beginning of the Renaissance. Over there in the Punjab, you've got these blokes who say, hey, let's not be Muslim or Hindu, even though they're sort of coming out of the Hindu thing. Let's not do this caste thing, which seems to create a lot of suffering and atrocity. And Buddhism did the same thing. I mean, Buddhism came out of Hinduism as well, and more or less said the same thing much earlier. So this is all fucked up. Let's get back to what we should actually have, and equality and fraternity. And so I love that. But what I find intriguing about the Sikhs, and I want to ask you about this, they're very, very, very militaristic. And that the Punjabi warrior culture is, one of the most warlike in Asia, perhaps in the world. And you talked about the Khalsa meaning pure, sure, but there was also the Sikh Khalsa army, perhaps something a bit like the Unsullied in Game of Thrones. And this became such a powerful militarized force that they went on conquest. So they were conquering from the Punjab up into Afghanistan and over into, they were expanding their empire, which means they were absolutely putting people to the sword, in a lot. And then the Brits, of course, showed up as the empire and went, they're useful. Let's employ them. And by the time you had the height of the British Raj, you had all these British officers, in the Sikh army. And then somewhere around 1850, I think 1849, actually, the British Army kind of went, you know what, these guys have gotten a bit too powerful. Let's just break that up a bit.
Yeah.
And so then they went to war with the Sikhs and, obviously had more firepower and blah, blah, blah. But the Sikh military thing seems, and the wars of conquest that the Sikhs engaged in over centuries seem to go rather against these love and peace and fraternity.
Well, okay, but
What do you say to that?
Deeper, the thing is, you got to go a little deeper into the Sikh history, because there were 10 Sikh groups that started with Guru Nanak. And the first 9 of them were pacifist, peace-loving, yogi type people, right? And what happened is when Guru Gobind Singh came on the scene, he was the 10th Sikh guru. He was known as the warrior, the soldier saint. He was the one who started the Sikh armies, okay? And the reason that happened was because the Mughal emperors in India at that time were doing...
The Mughals being the Muslim overlords.
Yes, they were doing mass, talk about genocide. They were killing hundreds of thousands of Hindus at that time. And the Sikhs rose up to defend the Hindus. That's the original army of the Sikhs. They actually made a pact with the Hindu clans at that time to protect them. And then that's where the Sikhs came in the Kataf, I'm not saying it right, the warrior class. They actually put themselves in the class of the warrior class to protect the Hindus, okay? And then it grew from there, because then you got the expansion, and then then the Sikhs got more power because they eventually did defeat the Muslims.
Right, and a lot of prominent army officers in the Indian army today are Sikhs, and they seem to be often the ones who rise to the highest sort of field marshal, admiral, career soldiers. Okay, so but we can allow for ambiguity within Catholicism. One can have Hildegard of Bingen and Francis of Assisi alongside the Spanish Inquisition.
I've been there too,
and the Crusades.
I spent a lot of time in Assisi, actually.
Yeah,
you studied there. I did a lot of healing training. A lot of my training happened in Italy there.
I guess, again, the reason I bring it up is I think there can be a tendency in the West to sort of eulogize the East for its spiritual traditions, and anyone who's ever spent, a bit of time in India kind of looks around and goes, whoa, you guys are brutal to each other. But at the same time, yes, there is this intense spirituality as well. Both exist in parallel with each other. And this paradoxical, ambiguous nature of the spiritual sort of theater there is definitely very real. But I do think that it can be quite naive within the West to think, oh, well, they're all very spiritual over there, and we're not very spiritual over here. And a little bit more complex, perhaps. Okay, but I was intrigued, to see that you had adopted the Sikh thing. Yep. Now, tell me about where you were born. And so you Jewish background, Jewish from where? What type of Judaism?
Well, I mean, my parents were from the East Coast, but my ancestors are from Eastern Europe, so they're Ashkenazi Jews.
Right, same as my ancestors, yeah.
Yeah, Belarus, I think Lithuania.
Then we're probably cousins, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So I mean, my dad and mom, they came from the East Coast in 1960 and they were like the renegades, because most of my family landed on the East Coast, and they were like, we're escaping this place, and they went to the West. So I was born here in Los Angeles, and my parents, I guess, in a way, were revolutionaries of their own, because they were brought up in, I would say, Orthodox Jewish, I think one of my grandfathers was a cantor and the other was a kosher butcher. And my dad moved here, and he actually was responsible for starting the Reform Temple, which is the most liberal version of Judaism.
Okay. But why? What got them interested in that?
Well, I just think, my dad was a hardcore Jew. I mean, in the
but why Reform Temple? Why not just go?
Well, because I think that's the thing. Like, I think my dad and my mom were a little bit more liberal than the normal Jews, let's say the conservative Orthodox Jews, right? So I think there must have been a movement at that time for Reform Judaism. And, that's kind of, I didn't even know that until at my dad's funeral, where they told the story about he and a group of his friends started a temple that I was bar mitzvahed in. And I had no idea because they never told me this. So
Did you go to synagogue growing up? And well, a lot of people have been bar mitzvahed and maybe only set, foot in a synagogue once or twice. Like a lot of Christians go to Easter, but they don't go to
well, I mean, I got, I went to, what do you call it? Hebrew school. So I learned Hebrew, and, and I was a good experience, I'd say, overall. I mean, I think the whole tradition of bar mitzvah and like bringing the young through that, it's kind of like a portal or
a rite of passage.
Rite of passage. I think that's very useful. I think it was really a good thing. But the thing is after that, I didn't feel like I was getting what I needed from Judaism. Like I felt like it was more of a social gathering versus a true spiritual.
Well, that was going to be my question: is if you were at a Reformed Jewish synagogue, how do you think that? How did those ceremonies, how did that ritual differ from quote unquote normal Orthodox?
Well, I never had been exposed to Orthodox, so I don't really know. I mean, I see it. Actually, the neighborhood I live in right now is in West LA, and this is like the home of Orthodox Jews. Like, there's probably more Orthodox Jews in this neighborhood than there are in Israel, or at least in Sikh. I mean, it's all Orthodox Jews. So I'm around the culture. I've been around it now for over 40 years, but I don't participate. Although I know rabbis, the rabbis are always trying to get me to come back. They're like, come back to our fold. I'm like, no, I'm good.
Well, you've got the beard. I mean, you're halfway there. Yeah.
I was in a building where I was like, 20 years ago, I was in an office where the lower part of the building was an Orthodox, Persian Orthodox. Okay. That's a very niche thing. And it was really interesting because they still to this day sacrifice goats. They do ritual sacrifice.
The Persian Orthodox.
The Persian Orthodox.
How very interesting. Where was that? In LA?
Yeah, in LA. And I was shocked because I was going down in the parking lot one day and I'm like, why is there a goat down here? And they're like, oh, we're doing a ritual. I'm like, what?
Interesting. That's I need to look that up. Persian meaning Babylonian, meaning
from Iran. The Iranian.
But meaning Persian from when the Jews were displaced to Persia, well, to Assyria, Babylon.
No, I would assume. I don't know the history.
Well, I think we need to find out. So I'm sorry, let's just go down this rabbit hole.
Still doing animal sacrifice, which I'm fine with. I mean, because I since have changed my eating habits where I do eat flesh and eat meat. Now, I was a vegetarian, 25 years, but
why did you change that out of interest?
Well, it's a long history. My first wife had cancer, and the doctors we were going to at that time, they all told her she needed to eat meat. She'd been a vegetarian for 25 years. And so I would, of course, being her husband, I was like, okay, I'm not going to just let you eat meat. I'm going to eat meat too. And so that kind of brought me into the realm of eating meat again.
But why keep going with it?
Well, I think over the years, being kind of science oriented, I listened to a lot of different doctors who, on the subject of nutrition. And, it seemed to me that there's a lot of evidence that meat is very beneficial if it's the right type of meat.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we are hunter-gatherers after all. Before we move into the various forms of alternative medicine that you're practicing, I just want to go down this Reform Judaism and Persian Judaism rabbit hole because I'm fascinated. So here I go, back on Wikipedia. The origins of Reform Judaism lie in the mid-19th century Germany, where Rabbi Abraham Geiger and his associates formulated its early principles, attempting to harmonize Jewish tradition with modern sensibilities in the age of emancipation. Brought to America by German-trained rabbis, the denomination gained prominence in the United States, flourishing in the 1860s to the 1930s, from the 1860s to the 1930s, in an era known as classical reform. Since the 1970s, the movement has adopted a policy of inclusiveness and acceptance, inviting as many people as possible to partake in its communities rather than adhering to strict theoretical clarity. It's strongly identified with progressive and liberal agendas in political and social terms. And this is where it gets interesting, mainly under the traditional Jewish rubric, Tikkun Olam, the repairing of the world. Tikkun Olam is a central motto of Reform Judaism, and acting in its name is one of the main channels for adherents to express their affiliation. The movement's most significant center is in North America. So I've been aware of Tikkun Olam for a long time, this idea of to repair the world through living peacefully, through acts of kindness, and this being central to particularly Ashkenazi Judaism and very much also Kabbalic, which incidentally kind of comes around not a dissimilar time to Sikhism.
No.
And then so it's interesting that you came out of that tradition, the repairing of the world.
Yeah.
However aware of it you were, you must have been hearing that term going on around you, yes?
That's actually the first time I'd heard it.
Really? Okay.
But I think but the thing is, it's that the word is interesting, but I think the ethos was always there.
Yeah.
Anyway, because that's, it's like mitzvah, it's like a very root thing, understanding of Judaism that you're, doing good in the world. I mean, helping people, doing good karma. It's real basic stuff, I would say. It's like the most basic stuff.
So it's interesting. So the Persian Jewish tradition, I've got it here. So the destruction of the second Jewish temple in Jerusalem by Rome, that's the beginning of the diaspora, 70 AD. That's when all ritual sacrifice within Judaism pretty much ended. But yes, indeed, there had been, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? We know all this. And it carries over into Rastafarianism with reggae and stuff. But what that refers to is way earlier than that, in about, I think, the 7th century, I need to check it, BC, that Assyria took over Judea and sacked the temple, brought a whole bunch of Jews into exile into Babylon and all their national treasures. And then it was under, I can't remember whether it was Nebuchadnezzar or I think was it Assurbanipal who took them. Nebuchadnezzar maybe was the one, I should check it, who let them go and let them go back. But a lot of them stayed. A lot of them said, actually, no, we quite like it over here because they've been treated quite well. And it does indeed seem that Persian form of Judaism, which includes animal sacrifice, does have its roots with the ones who stayed.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating that all the different cultures in the world and documents. I think Ethiopia, there's Ethiopian.
Yeah, no, there is. And it's, I think a lot of these religions, like with Christianity, you could really argue that there have always been Christianities and there have been Judaisms, so you get the very, very peaceful thing of the reparation of the world. But if you look at, first set temple Judaism, it's, we kill everybody, so they're not as nice. They're just a kind of conquering.
Well, there's some, I follow this one guy, his name is Cliff High, and he goes back 6,000 years and talks about, and I think it's mentioned in the Bible, the Elohim.
Yeah.
And that's the plural Elohim. It's not the one, it's plural.
Sure.
And he, they
God's, yeah.
Huh?
No, God. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and he claims, and I don't know if it's him or where he's getting that, but these gods were the ones who created that ethos of terror among the Jews.
As you know, if you followed any of my work, I'm an autism dad, and we have a whole career before this podcast in helping people with neurodivergence, either who are professionals in the field. Are you a therapist? Are you a caregiver? Are you a parent? Or are you somebody with neurodivergence? When my son Rowan was diagnosed with autism in 2004, I really didn't know what to do. So I reached out for mentorship, and I found it through an amazing adult autistic woman who's very famous, Dr. Temple Grandin. And she told me what to do. And it's been working so amazingly for the last 20 years that not only is my son basically independent, but we've helped countless thousands of others reach the same goal, working in schools, working at home, working in therapy settings. If you would like to learn this cutting edge neuroscience-backed approach, it's called Movement Method. You can learn it online. You can learn it very, very simply. It's almost laughably simple. The important thing is to begin. Let yourself be mentored as I was by Dr. Grandin and see what results can follow. Go to this website, newtrailslearning.com. Sign up as a gold member. Take the online Movement Method course. It's in 40 countries. Let us know how it goes for you. We really want to know. We really want to help people like me, people like you out there live their best life, to live free, ride free, see what happens.
Oh, yeah. No, I can tell you kind of the theory of that. So Judaism was actually a polytheistic religion. It starts with gods, not God. It's a Canaanite, so it's from that whole area, from southern Anatolia down to Egypt. They have a bunch of gods, and they are essentially the same gods, similar gods to the Mesopotamian gods, because it's the Fertile Crescent from, 6,000 years ago. That's where all agriculture and the cities begin. And that crescent is from the Gulf of the Arabian Gulf, Kuwait, up the Tigris and Euphrates in an arc, whoops, a little bit of southern Turkey, and then down through Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and along the coast towards Egypt and the Nile Valley. But it looks like a big crescent. So hence the Fertile Crescent. And that's where, we see agriculture and the cities as we know them beginning with Sumeria and so on, about 6,000, as you say, years ago. Although there are many alternative timelines of history being rewritten, which gets very exciting now. But definitely at that time, Judaism was polytheistic, and then it gradually gets whittled down to the two main Mesopotamian gods, which is Enki and, his brother. Enki's the nice one who likes us. And then there's,
Bill is it Bill and Enki? Right?
How am I forgetting the Enki's? Because it's the bad one who becomes the nasty one who doesn't like us, who ends up being the one who gets worshipped and becomes Yahweh. But before he's Yahweh, so we've got Enki and Enlil. Thank you. And Enlil becomes Yahweh and has a wife, by the way. And in the early temples, all the Yahweh idols have a wife. She gradually sort of disappears from the scene as things get a bit more patriarchal. But yeah, it seems that this idea of the angry god, the jealous god, was this endless back and forth which the Mesopotamians had between the god who creates us and loves us, which is Enlil, and his brother, who finds us a massive pain in the arse and wants to wipe us out all the time when we cease to become useful for mining activities and other slave activities, and has a go from time to time. And then Enlil keeps coming along and saving us. And then somehow the Israelites end up with Yahweh, not his nicer brother. And then they're always trying to appease him. And so that's where we get this idea of appeasement and heaven and hell and punishment and, angry gods and pestilences and all of this. But this all comes in kind of gradually. And then, of course, then that all gets very softened by the time you get to the Second Temple, around the Iron Age. And then, so by the time the Romans show up and take over Judea, because it's the border between the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire. So it's an area you've got to have control of. Otherwise you lose control of the Eastern Mediterranean. And so they, say, okay, this is Roman now. By then it's to some degree Judaism as we know it, but it's gone through many, many evolutions. And so, but it's interesting that your father was very much part of the sort of progression of that, and sort of through Kabbalah to this reform movement with this idea of healing and repairing the world. Because I would say that that is kind of what you're trying to do. Would you not?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting because I didn't realize this, but I had one of my uncles who was, I think cousin of my father. He was the governor of Rhode Island.
Okay.
He was an amazing progressive governor who put through a lot of, societal changes in that state that we're talking in the 1960s,
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get to the actual healing. So you've got a bunch of things that you do, and I kind of want to give them all a little bit of time and attention because I'm not sure people will be aware of them. So chiropractic, touched on it a bit. So let's get through that one rather quickly. Let's say somebody had some sort of chronic autoimmune thing going on rather than just a sore back because they fell off a horse. What does chiropractic do for that?
Well, the very high level theory on that, and it's very simple. 5-year-old kid would get this, is that imagine.
Oh, that is too much for me.
Yeah. Imagine you've got a hose and the water's coming through the hose and you kink the hose. Now the water's not coming through the hose. What's the solution? You unkink the hose. So that's really the whole theory of chiropractic. If your nerves are getting pinched because the vertebrae are misaligned or subluxated, it's going to inhibit the life force nerve flow into your organs and your cells and your tissues. So you remove that interference through the adjustments, and now you've got more life force. The body, there's a really elegant saying the chiropractors have. This is one of the first things I learned in chiropractic school, is the power that made the body can heal the body. So you remove the interference by releasing the nerve flow, and there you go.
Now, when you say life force, and you were a yoga student for a long time, still are, I think, because you offer yoga, and that would be for you Kundalini. But in Western allopathic medicinal terms, how can we define life force?
Well,
electric energy within the body.
Well,
cerebral spinal fluid.
Yeah. I mean, look at cardiology. What's the number one test they do? It's an EKG.
Yeah.
They're measuring the electrical conduction of your heart. Mm-hmm. If you've got a brain problem, they're measuring the electrical conduction of your brain. So these are just really obvious, signs that the body is electrical. And there's electricity flowing through your body.
Yeah, which is a frequency and a vibration. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that electricity is the most obvious version of it. But in Chinese medicine, we talk about qi or life force, where it's subtle, even more subtle. It's more like the electromagnetic field versus the electrical is like the flow of the ions, which you can physically measure. But then you've got this whole energy field. So whenever you have electricity, you also have the electromagnetic field associated with it.
Define ions and what they mean biologically.
Well, an ion would be like, it's exactly what you look at in a wire, a copper wire, negative ion flowing through the channeling electricity, right? In the most physical term, we call it an electron. Right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is an ion the same?
Yeah, it's like a free electron and it's floating, right?
Why not call it an electron then? Why is it an ion?
Well, ion is, they're interchangeable terms. It's like, you got one form of an apple, another form. It's just it's a term that we use to describe that form of energy.
But to put simply, chiropractic allows the flow of electrical energy to go more freely.
I would say electrical / life force, qi, but it allows the basic concept is the power that made the body can heal the body. Just like if you have a cut, the cut heals on its own. We don't have to go to a doctor to heal a cut. It heals on its own. You might need to put a Band-Aid on it, but it heals.
By the way, I had to check because I always had to check electrons and ions. So here's what I got. An ion is an electrically charged particle produced by either removing electrons from a neutral atom to give a positive ion, or adding electrons to a neutral atom to give a negative ion. So it seems that the addition of electrons makes ions. So maybe it's many, depending on how they're charged. Okay. So it's always good to check in with these things because, people, I think, have these questions and are often a bit scared to ask.
One of the things I would say on that, this is a very deep topic when we talk about ions, because, in Western terms, we think of them as particles, right? It's like a piece of an atom that displaces or attaches, like a puzzle, right? It comes off or it goes in. And that's true on one level, right? But on a deeper level, that ion is a hologram that exists in another realm, and we hallucinate it in our mind.
All right. Well, you're talking about quantum, where
I'm talking about the quantum level of that ion.
Right. So and I think that is largely accepted these days, that light and electricity and all of these things are in superposition, meaning that they could be in many places at once in potential until they're measured or observed. And then they become a particle for that moment. But then they go back to being in superposition again.
Exactly.
Thoughts. Yeah.
That's very important to understand.
Which is, I rather love that because it's just means that everything is possible. Okay. So do you think, do you regard chiropractic as a preventative thing? So for example, if I say, well, look, I sort of feel okay, why would I need to go an adjustment? Would you say, no, actually, Rue, an adjustment every 3 months is a good thing, just to make sure that things are flowing?
It depends on your lifestyle and what you do. Like, I'm a yogi. I'm moving my spine. I'm doing all kinds of yoga things. I might need to get adjusted once a year, but if somebody does not have a yogic lifestyle, they're not moving properly or doing anything that fosters proper alignment, they're going to need a chiropractor.
Yeah.
And that's like about 90% of the population, maybe even more. I heard a statistic today that said that only 1% of the population works on farms. Whereas 100 years ago, it could have been 50%. Maybe 200 years, it was 90%. So bottom line is about 99% of the population is either stuck in a car, an office, or a sedentary lifestyle where they're not moving their spine, like what you're doing, like going out and working with horses. And most people don't do that.
Yeah, sure. No. And I can definitely feel when, I feel a bit stiff, but I can usually relate it to something. I got a bash. I fell off. I was pushing the wheelbarrow up Pooh Mountain and it twisted slightly or something. If someone is leading a standard sedentary lifestyle, how often do you think they should probably go and get themselves an adjustment?
Well, I mean, my main recommendation, I'd say, is like once a month, I would say.
Okay.
If you really want
monthly.
And that, again, that's based on your lifestyle. If you're like an extreme athlete, you might be going twice a month or 3 times a month. It's like, just depends. I mean, I have patients who get adjusted weekly. They have the chiropractor come to them. They're billionaires.
Can that be too much?
Not necessarily. No. If it, because a lot of times, like chiropractors, I would say most kind of modern chiropractors, they're going to be doing a lot of different therapies that are not just adjusting. They might be doing, massage or, some kind of physical therapy where it's really a form of active release or muscle training or, stuff like that.
Okay. All right. You are also doing a lot with hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Yep.
This is something I think a lot of us have heard of. Why is to be oxygenated like this so good? And how do you do it?
Okay, so hyperbarics have been around that we know of since the 1600s. That's when the first hyperbaric chambers were used medically. And basically what they found is over the last several hundred years is that exposing your body to a hyperbaric environment where you're increased pressure, air pressure, what it does is there's a physics principle called Henry's law. Okay. And basically what that says is, when a gas is put under pressure, that gas, if it's also in contact with a liquid, more of that gas will go into the liquid. So it's like forcing more air into water in the most basic way of understanding. So when a person goes into a hyperbaric chamber, now you've got that increased pressure, and because of Henry's law, more air is being pumped into your plasma beyond the red blood carrying capacity of oxygen. So now you're flooding your tissues with far more oxygen than you would normally be exposed to. And what they found in the research is that will cause epigenetic switches in your DNA to be turned on. And what's happening is massive anti-inflammatory response. So it's really, really good for any kind of autoimmune condition.
Okay. Brings down inflammation.
Yeah. And,
it's interesting too. I'm reading here that in 1918, during the massive Spanish flu thing that killed everybody, Dr. Orville Cunningham discovered a difference in mortality rate between the flu patients living in higher elevations compared to patients living at lower elevations. In higher elevations, you breathe in less oxygen. This discovery led to many flu patients seeking hyperbaric oxygen therapy treatments with great success.
And that's an interesting thing. So we're talking about two things here. One is hyperbaric and one is hypobaric.
Yes, exactly.
When you go to a high elevation, now you're hypobaric.
Right.
So the latest research shows that when you do intermittent hypobaric therapy, in other words, lowering the oxygen content in your blood, you get almost the exact same benefits of being in a hyperbaric chamber. Because the body has to respond by creating more blood,
releasing more oxygen.
Yeah, more. So everything turns on so you can absorb more oxygen. So,
and you said you talked about the 17th century, and I'm reading this now.
Yeah.
There's oxygen therapy began in 1662 when British physician Nathaniel Henshaw built the first pressurized room to treat pulmonary and digestive conditions. At this point, the use of oxygen therapy stalled until 1788, so a century later, when they used compressed hyperbaric air and a diving bell for underwater repair. This spawned August Zieber to create the first deep sea diving suit in 1819. The first true hyperbaric tank arrived in 1834 under the direction of Dr. Juno. The bulletin for the Academy of Medicine reported Dr. Juno's success with a complete recovery from a variety of medical conditions. And then the 1900s come along. But hold on, back in 1662, they didn't know what oxygen was. So why would they be knowing to build a pressurized?
What they were doing is compressing air.
Why?
So because the thing is, it's not the oxygen per se, it's the pressure of the air or the atmospheres so think of about like when you go into water and dive down, when you get down to say 10 feet or 12 feet, you're at 1.3 atmospheres. That's a form of hyperbaric right there. So what they're doing is reproducing the effects of being underwater, but with air, not even oxygen, just air itself. Because once you pressurize that air, the volume of oxygen itself will concentrate more into the plasma. So hyperbarics do not need to be done with extra oxygen. Although if you add the extra oxygen, you get even more benefit because now you're increasing the availability of oxygen even more.
Right. Okay, I'm going further down the Henshaw rabbit hole because I'm thinking, how could a guy called Nathaniel Henshaw in England in 1662, which is English Civil War? No, it's just before, it's under Cromwell, I think, at that point. People didn't know much about things at that point. And now it says he proposed to create a chamber. thinking that but he didn't actually build it. It was never built. And then other people came along, I think in the 18th century and did. But Henshaw recommended pressures up to 3 times atmospheric pressure and durations for acute conditions until their resolution. And there was another 170 years before a functional air chamber would finally become a reality. But what I'm intrigued by is how would somebody in 17th century Civil War England, where they're still burning witches, be coming up with, I'm intrigued. How? Why?
I think that, if you look back in the history of medicine, to Paracelsus and even Isaac Newton, I don't know what year they were in, but these people have very advanced thinking. So
Yeah,
you gotta think, okay, they're thinking of everything, pressure of air, the effects of magnetic energy. I mean, they were using magnets back then, so they're
right. And I see that Henshaw was a member of the Royal Society. So they were all getting together and experimenting. And of course, as you say, Isaac Newton was in there with him.
Yeah.
But
they were looking at gravity, magnetics, all different forms of physics experiments, so it just makes sense that they would, experiment with air pressure as one of the, things that,
I think he was coming from the the Greek physician, the ideas of Galen, Claudius Galenus, the Greek physician, but living under the Romans, 126 to 216 AD. A lot of things go back to him. This idea of the humors and fluids and putting pressure to correct the balance in humors and fluids. And I guess they must have been observing that changes in atmosphere and air pressure make people feel differently, right?
We have to know that people who live at altitude,
yes,
they have long
life. The mountain people seem to be healthier and more jumpy around it. Yes. Yeah. Not dying of malaria down there on the plains. Yes. The good clean air. Interesting though, because in that time, there were still people obviously believing that you shouldn't open the window at night because of bad humors from the air. I think mistaking swamp fever and being bitten by malaria carrying mosquitoes and that sort of thing. So it's interesting. And there's nothing specific here in what I've just been able to see in the last 2 minutes. Say, Henshaw noticed that people living up in the Scottish Highlands or the French Alps seem to live longer. But there must have been these observations going on. I presume that people like Galen must have, because the Roman Empire spanned all these things. But it's fascinating to me that, so hyperbarics, we're going to get more oxygen in our systems, and that's going to help us with inflammation.
Inflammation's the low-hanging fruit. The other thing that hyperbarics does, every week that you spend in a hyperbaric chamber, meaning one hour a day for 5 days or 7 days, either one, I think. What they've seen now, and this is very recent research, is that your circulating stem cells will triple in your blood for every week that you spend in a hyperbaric chamber. And
so if you do a once a week treatment.
Yeah. Well, no, not once a week, every day for a week. And this is published studies. I have access to some real recent stuff. It's unpublished.
So again, as a preventative, what do you recommend for people if they want to explore hyperbarics?
Well, the reason I did it personally was because of the Israeli research. So the Israelis, published a research paper, it's about 4 years ago now, where they showed that spending 60 days in hyperbaric every day, 2 hours a day, increased telomere length by 25%.
What length?
Telomere.
Tell us what telomeres are.
Telomeres are the end caps of your chromosomes. And what happens is every time your cells divide, those telomeres shrink until when it gets to the end, you don't divide anymore. And that cell then becomes senescent. Once you have enough of those senescent cells, that's it. That's your lifespan, right? So if you can increase that length, you're essentially reversing the effects of aging.
And the hyperbaric chambers look like scary places. They look like, the old cast iron forms of like MRI things that they put you in where you're going to die of claustrophobia. So How do you deal with not going mad when you go into an hyperbaric?
Well, okay, that's a great question. Because of that, we got the largest possible chamber we could get. The chamber we have is over 60 inches diameter, so it's very large on the inside. It can accommodate like 4 to 5 people. Usually just 1 or 2 goes in there, but
Because is it sealed once you go in there? The door closes.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
so do people ever panic in there?
There are windows, so 99% of the patients don't have a problem at all. Because once you're in there, you can get the reason people get claustrophobic is the fear of not being able to escape. So there are internal mechanisms within the chamber where you can get out from the inside. You're not trapped in there. So when people will realize that, they will, oh yeah, I'm okay. Like I can get out of here if I need to. That usually lowers the fear factor quite a bit.
And what do people do while they're in the hyperbaric chamber? Are they having a pint? Are they reading a book? Are they claiming epic poetry to each other, or are you lying there very still?
Yeah, you can do whatever. I mean, I'll listen to podcasts or read a book or whatever. You can do whatever you want, but typically after about a half an hour in a session, you'll fall asleep because it's very sedative. It has a very relaxing effect on your nervous system.
And do you still go into a hyperbaric chamber yourself?
Yeah, I do. I usually do it 2 or 3 times a month. I go in.
And how long do you go in for? How long do you go in for?
For like an hour, sometimes an hour and a half.
Okay. Talk to me about red light. Not the red light district of Los Angeles, of course there are many, but red light therapy.
The red light is, it's the up and coming biohack. There's a lot of research coming out about red light. Red light, basically what it's doing at the most fundamental level is it's activating the mitochondria. The mitochondria are the energy factories within our cells, and mitochondria just so happen to have what are called chromophores, which are light receptive, antennas, basically.
Right. So that we photosynthesize without knowing it, sort of thing.
Exactly. And so when you get exposed to the right wavelengths of light, which happen to be in the red and the near infrared range, you're activating the maximal amount of ATP production as well as mitochondrial biogenesis. So it actually helps strengthen and grow healthy mitochondria.
Why of the different lights that are on the spectrum, why is red light such a powerful one?
I think it's probably due to the fact that, terrestrial life, we evolved. I think over 40 or 50% of the light that comes from the sun is in the red and the near infrared range. And so it's a factor in life. Really, it just comes from the biology of life on the planet. And UV light is also important as well. And that's where we're getting our vitamin D from. And also in the recent research, it's not just vitamin D, it's all of your hormones get increased in UV light.
Could you not just, go and buy a red incandescent bulb from the light store? Why do you need, what's special about a machine that gives you red light?
The thing that they, from all the decades of research, there's been decades of research done on red light. There are a few, say, bands of the frequency in the light and the wavelengths where you're getting the biggest bang for your buck. Okay. So if you're just buying a standard thing of incandescent light, you're going to get some benefit. But when you go within those very tight bands, you're getting the maximum. So it's really about efficiency. In our clinic, the red light that we use, the treatment time is only 12 minutes. It doesn't take a long time to get the biologic effect of red light. With an incandescent light, you might not even get all the benefits if you sat in front of it for hours. So it's about efficiency.
Okay. People talk about it. I've heard people talk about it as an anti-aging thing.
Yeah.
It's a reality that it's actually boosting your mitochondria.
Mitochondria, and the corollary to that is your cells. You get collagen production in your skin. You get increased function of your organs. clinically, we've seen people with heart conditions improve, or neurologic conditions like MS, Parkinson, dementia, all get benefited because our brain has a massive amount of mitochondria. And so when you expose brain and the body to a massive amount of the right wavelength of red, near infrared, you're rejuvenating the mitochondria.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm also, of course, because I need to know the story behind everything, saying light therapy has been around for more than 50 years, I'm reading here. It was discovered by the Hungarian physician Endre Mester in the 1960s, when scientific experiments with red lasers on rats led to hair growth and wound healing, according to a research article published in the Journal of Biophotonics. Over the years, light therapy was largely considered bogus, but with new research, some conflicting, the scientific community has started to take notice. Right now in the US, it's still considered non-mainstream, but there's growing academic and clinical centers adopting the technology and making it available. Yeah, so it's very interesting. We know that people also use other types of color, like blue, green as well. So why is red so much better? And what do blue and green also? We're often told that blue is bad, right? That our screens are blue and
so the blue, I believe, is more antimicrobial.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an infection, green light, it has another effect, I think, on pain. So each wavelength of light will have a variation of its benefits on the body. But the thing that differentiates red from all of those different colors is that's the one that's focusing on your mitochondria primarily.
And then is red light the same as infrared?
It's in that. Okay. So when I say red, it's kind of that band of red and near infrared that we're looking at. It's between like 600 and 1100 nanometer. Okay. That's the red and near infrared range.
Why not use infrared?
Okay. There's near infrared is more targeting into your mitochondria. The far infrared, which is typically more found in saunas, are thermal heating. So it doesn't have the photonic effect on the mitochondria as the near infrared. But there's still a benefit from using it. It's just a different type of benefit.
Okay. Got it. It's fascinating. There's a bunch of things I've actually wanted to ask forever about these things. Because, people tell you about them, you're like, oh yeah, that sounds interesting. And then what did they say again? I can't really remember, except that it's apparently good for me and over there. And then you forget about it, So it's really good to have a chance to dive deeper. There's one more I want to ask you about. So, and this is to do with stem cells. So I think people now, are used to the word stem cell. But I remember, was it, 10 or 15 years ago, stem cells were suddenly things that were being talked about. What the fuck is a stem cell? Now suddenly it's, oh yeah, stem cells. And as I understand them, they are the stem, the embryo of a cell that gets put into place, and then it can become this cell or that cell, depending on how it gets activated. But as cells die, they need to be replaced with new stem cells or new cells, which have to be stem cells before they're specialized nose cells or neurons, or I'm trying to think of something funny, but it's escaping me. So it'll come.
Well, stem, when we're born, our body has a certain supply of stem cells that is dormant your whole life, pretty much.
Yes.
Life. And what happens is when you're injured or have something happen where your body gets injured, let's say you just cut your finger. That's the most thing. The stem cells in your body will get the message, hey guys, you need to wake up and go to that finger and repair that finger.
Right.
And that's like,
it's like the polyfiller. It's like the concrete. It's like, the concrete's got chipped over there in, finger steps. We need to send the lads over there.
Of our body, the intelligence of our body will work with those dormant stem cells and put them where they need to go based on our requirement.
Okay. So with this in mind, talk to me about pulse electromagnetic field therapy. Pulse electromagnetic field therapy.
Yeah. So PEMF, that's a type of therapy that originated, I think it was in Germany. It is part of it was Germany and also Russia. In their space program, what they found was that the early cosmonauts, when they'd come back from space and, they were doing the long duration space flight, they would come back and their bodies would literally be like jello. They'd come out of the spacecraft and they would collapse with no muscle tone. Their bones were all osteoporotic. Their body was literally melted because they didn't have access to the magnetic field of the earth, right? So they found out from doing experiments that living organisms on the planet require magnetic field to even exist. It's a requirement, just like water and air is a requirement. They call it vitamin M, the magnetic energy. It's called vitamin M.
Okay. So given that we're here on the planet and we're getting that, why do we need this magnetic type of therapy?
Well, it's just like, okay, so think of it like this. Modern society, we've, for the most part, cut our connection to the earth, the electromagnetic of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
We walk around in rubber shoes or leather shoes, whatever kind of shoes we're wearing, on, surfaces that are not electrically connected to the planet. So we've lost that connection right there, just that alone, right? And then you add in all the interference of the modern, electromagnetic pollution that we live in. We're getting degraded massively from that connection. And so we need an extra dose. Just like, a lot of people now in LA will go and get an IV of vitamin C or vitamin B or whatever, because food is totally lacking in nutrition. Vitamin M is just as important as any vitamin. It's
right.
It's not that it's a requirement that we have it. And so what we've seen, and the research really clearly shows this, is that when you expose yourself to a pulse magnetic field, it's going to increase and accelerate the healing process, no matter what that thing is. It can be a bone-related injury, a sprained strain. It could be an infection. It could be, a tumor in your brain. It doesn't really matter. When you increase the magnetic energy into the body will start to repair itself in an accelerated way.
Okay, but then why not just go lie down under a tree?
That can work in most cases, I would say, like if you're just looking for wellness and like just to maintain your basic energy. Totally. I do that myself. I do that every weekend. I go to the beach and lay under a tree on the ground. Yeah. That's a very, very basic thing you can do. But what we've seen is when you have either a chronic illness or an acute injury, and we're talking about broken bones, we're talking about people with chronic digestive or autoimmune issues, and even cancers. When the body gets that deranged and out of balance, and you expose it to a high-powered magnetic field, pulsing magnetic field, it greatly increases the healing. So when laying underneath the tree is not going to fix a broken bone, but getting on a high-powered EMF will cut your healing time by 1/5. That's what they've seen. There are a lot of times people get a fracture and it doesn't heal properly or it doesn't heal all the way. And that's when a pulse magnetic field comes in. It can finish and can help the body, assist the body in finishing that job it's trying to do.
Right. Okay. And you use a machine for that. So does the machine, I know it's got this sort of big head on it. Is it, you have this big head because it's just going to throw out this massive electromagnetic field at you?
Well, we have several different units we use in the office. The primary one is a pulse table, and it's literally the patient lays on it. It's the entire body. Okay. Your full body from head to toe is being saturated in a very powerful magnetic field. That's the primary therapy. But we use that one that you're talking about, the head, when we want to focus on a specific area, like a joint, say a knee or a shoulder or a low back. That head will generate a huge magnetic field, pulse magnetic field that will stimulate tissue repair. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I'm reading a little bit here from the Mayo Clinic, and also the FDA has approved it. It's interesting because they won't approve much that isn't a drug. So I'm actually surprised that they've approved electromagnetic therapy. And what is also true is, spoiler alert, actually I do work with quite a few physicians who wholeheartedly recommend it for the reasons you just described. But what I think is interesting is that when I say, well, why not just go lie under a tree? I can actually answer that question. I think that if you do, when you say things like, well, it won't heal a broken bone, I think it will still heal it faster if you can do that. But I think, I think the truth of the matter is that most people have no opportunity to lie under a tree, even though they live on planet Earth. It's so crazy because I think most of us are zoo animals. Yeah. We live in cages. It's not just that we're wearing shoes. It's that we're walking on concrete, and we go from our house to the car, and then we get in a car.
Also the big thing that most people aren't even tapped into is non-native EMF.
Indeed, I know that you don't know much about the work we do, but the work we do with the brain, specifically with people with autism, trauma, psychosis, and so on. One of the first things we do is take off shoes and go outside, because it immediately has a calming effect. And that's why everybody knows when you go to the beach, drink in hand, toes in the sand. Why does that feel good? It's the toes in the sand bit that feels good, because you can have a drink in a bar with your toes in leather. It's actually not the drink that's making you feel good. It's the toes in the sand. And the tapping into the electromagnetic field. So like a camping trip, whenever you lie on the ground, everyone always comes back from a camping trip feeling rejuvenated, it's always the best thing you can do. And, it's interesting that billionaires don't really spend a lot of time going to ultra fancy luxury hotels. They're much more likely to invest in safaris in Zambia, where they're sleeping in tents. It's very much a product, of course, of the industrial age. But even before that, I think actually even of the agricultural age. First, as we left our hunter-gatherer roots, where we're feeling great because we're living on the planet as we're supposed to, agriculture comes in, and now we've got hard, repetitive, back-breaking, body-breaking toil instead of the adventure of hunting and gathering. And then, of course, you throw a bit of slavery in there with it and a bit of serfdom, and you're off to the races for some good old suffering. But then, of course, what people had a great desire to do, because then being tied to the land was a form of slavery, was to get off the land, get away from the land. So when the Industrial Revolution hit, there was a great desire for people to leave their sort of feudal settings and escape the tyranny of the laws. Of course, they replaced it with the tyranny of factory owners. But as soon as that happened, and we're now 250 years in from this experiment, so however many generations that is, of not being possible to go and say lie under a tree, because you've got to now go to work in a factory, and you live in this house, and you're going to work in the factory, you're going to go home, sleep in the house. So since about 1840, the chances for most people in the West to actually go and sit under a tree every day went from reasonably often to zero. And then you've got generation after generation, and this rejection of nature's dangerous, it's scary, you can't go outside, if it's rainy, you can't go outside if it's too hot, you can't go outside if it's too cold, you can't go out if it's this, if it's that. So it's only if it's now a beach holiday, which you probably end up, unless you live in Los Angeles, people will save up once a year to get on a plane to go for a week and have toes in the sand. And then when the picture of retirement is, I'm going to retire to the beach. Why am I going to retire to the beach? Well, partly that's the environment where Homo sapiens sapiens evolved, margin of land and water in a warm climate, Africa. But so we naturally feel at home there. But also it's because that's where we tap into the electromagnetic field maybe once a year on vacation. Yeah. So it doesn't surprise me that one might need to hook up to a machine.
Well, I think the other thing,
despite the fact that a lot of people have backyards, but they don't lie on the grass in their backyards.
If you made it this far into the podcast, then I'm guessing you're somebody that, like me, loves to read books about not just how people have achieved self-actualization, but particularly about the relationship with nature, spirituality, life, the universe, and everything. And I'd like to draw your attention to my books. If you would like to read the story of how we even arrived here, perhaps you'd like to check out the 2 New York Times bestsellers, The Horseboy and The Long Ride Home, and come on an adventure with us and see what engendered, what started Live Free, Ride Free. And before we go back to the podcast, also check out The Healing Land, which tells the story of my years spent in the Kalahari with the Sun, Bushmen, hunter-gatherer people there, and all that they taught me and mentored me in, and all that I learned. Come on that adventure with me.
the other huge thing that's afflicting society, men and women, but more so women, after menopause, I don't know what the actual percentage is, but it's pretty high. Most women at some point in their life are going to be osteoporotic. They're going to lose the bone matrix, okay? And they're going to be susceptible to falls and broken hips, and that will quickly lead to death, okay? So what we've seen clinically with the PEMF is that women who are already osteoporotic, and the only option they are given is to take, Western meds, which will make their bone more dense, but more brittle and more likely to break. So that is not a great, remedy for that situation. But what we've seen is that when women even just lay on the PEMF once a week, their osteoporosis will reverse. We've seen patients have gone from osteoporosis to no osteoporosis in like a year. It's not something that happens overnight, but we have one lady who in 1 year went from osteoporosis to no osteoporosis doing the PEMF 1 day a week. So that's a huge factor in sustaining the health population. I would say it's huge.
So with all of these treatments, there are now many devices out there for doing this. I've got some in my house. People talk about different ones, and of course, everyone swears by the one they've got. So I use something called the Beamer, BEMER blanket.
No.
Are you familiar with that one from Switzerland? No. And we actually got that initially for our horses to improve circulation, microcapillary circulation, which basically chilled them out and made them more rideable, as well as, well-being and healing. But then when we discovered there was a human one, we started sleeping on that, and oh wow, things like jet lag started going away and that sort of thing. And, obviously that's a form of biofeedback. And then I also have an old Russian device called a Scalar.
I love the Scalar. That's one of my go-to. Whenever I travel, I have a Scalar.
So for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a little handheld device. You put A batteries in it, or AA batteries in it, and you put it around your body on anywhere that you've got that you think might be a bit hurty. And it kind of locks on in this weird way. And then it goes, boop, 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 and then it goes when it's done. And then you have to move it on to another spot. When I smashed up my left leg in 6 places, I used many things, but one of the things, I Scalar the shit out of it, and went through so many batteries because it would use up all the juice, because you're supposed to do it for like 30, 40 seconds. And on this big break, it was like giving me 20-minute doses. I was afraid I was going to break the machine. So I've been using things for a while, but I know that you are a fan of a couple. Talk me about the Sigma instrument.
Well,
That's
okay. So
like,
measurement is what I use to analyze the spine.
so that's a
It-
chiropractic sort of
It's
machine.
chiropractic tool. And the interesting history on that is it was originally developed as a piezoelectric sensor to test the hull of the space shuttle, the tiles that they put on the space shuttle. They used that sensor to check for the hull integrity. Okay. And then what happened was, I guess, I don't know whose idea it was, but they figured out, oh, we can use this to test the integrity of the spine.
Well,
And
that does make sense.
so it got repurposed into a spinal analyzing machine.
Well, that does make sense to me, because the concept of tensegrity, right? You know,
Yeah.
the tension and integrity of a building,
Yeah.
and then biotensegrity, all of our tendons and ligaments. That's
Exactly. So this tests the tensegrity of each segment of the spine, and it also adjusts the segment with a vibration.
so
So
it does the
instead of,
adjustment.
Yeah, so instead of cracking a bone, what it does is it vibrates the joint. Instead of using force, it's using frequency.
Okay.
So, just through the principle of physics, if you're using a frequency, you can get actually even a better adjustment that is a deeper adjustment than actually cracking a bone. Because when
Now, because I love the cracking of the bone.
the
So
cracking of the bone,
if I came in on it, oh, I want my crack, how
well,
would
the
I
thing
be
is
feeling?
when you crack a bone, what happens? The body will resist it.
Yeah.
Because it's happening too slow. When you increase the speed of the adjustment, it goes below the body's reaction, and you can get a better adjustment. So I use both. I start my adjustments out with a Sigma instrument. If I don't see that vertebra move, which I can tell right away because of the feedback it gives me, I will do a manual adjustment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I still might get my crack. That's good, because I like them. And then, so stem wave tissue joint regenerative therapy. This is another one of. I think
huge.
that's a German company, is it not?
It's
Stem wave?
well, it's a German design technology. The original technology came from Germany in the 1980s, and it was originally called lithotripsy. It's what they use in hospitals to crush kidney stones.
Okay.
So that's the original. What they found out was that those same shock waves, they do sound wave, very powerful sound waves through water to target the kidneys when they had kidney stones. They still use them today in a hospital. But they found out that those same kind of shock waves would stimulate the repair of the joint.
Interesting.
And so then the machines then got created at that point that had these treatment heads so that you can focus the sound waves directly into the joint. And so the stem wave is one of the top tier machines. There's a lot of different shockwave devices on the market, but they're called electrohydraulic shockwave. Those are the original lithotripsy type machine. And there's really only a couple companies in the world that make them. And they're both German design, basically. Germany is.
And it's coming down once again to vibration.
Sound. It's using.
Well, sound is vibration.
Yeah,
right?
But the key here is the focus and the intensity and the waveform. So a true shock wave will have a huge waveform that goes straight up and then down, and then it creates a negative vacuum effect into the tissue. So it's like a shock wave. So it's bam into the tissue, and negative, a positive, and then a negative. And then negative is where the bottom of the shock wave is where the cell gets the signal to repair.
Interesting.
It gets the signal to activate the body's self-repair mechanism, activating the stem cells. So that's the reason the machine is called stem wave, because it's actually initiating the signaling to enhance and greatly accelerate the healing process within the joint.
Okay. Then there's another device, which again I've heard of, cyberscan biofeedback analysis, which and obviously like a Scalar that we talked about, or the Beamer, those are biofeedback as well. How would something like this? How does the cyberscan differ from those, and what's?
Well, okay,
What
the
are the
cyber scan is really the thing that you're going to love. Well, we talked about this, but anyway, cyber scan comes from Germany. And actually, I went to Germany to be trained over a decade ago, right near Frankfurt, by the way. And basically, the way the cyber scan operates is through scalar waves.
What's a scalar wave?
That's a great question. A scalar wave is a non-EMF wave. So all these other things we've been talking about have electromagnetic frequency, vibration, energy that you can measure with a meter. Okay. The difference with a scalar wave is you can't measure it. You cannot, there is no, well.
How do you know it's there?
That's okay. That's a great question. This is very advanced physics. Okay. There's very few people in the world that even know about this type of stuff. But essentially, it is there, but it's very subtle. And it has like the cyber scan has built into it the ability to use the scalar wave as a measuring tool. And now what I'm talking about right now is a proprietary invention. Okay. I cannot tell you because I actually don't know myself. I use it as a practitioner, but can tell you this, that the readings that the cyber scan gives are extraordinarily revealing. In the sense, I can see someone zero medical history of that person, and I can probably in 90+% of the people tell them what their main issue is that they've had their entire life, or something that's happened that was very traumatic or caused a lot of disruption in their energy field. It's hard to explain this because it's not something that we even relate to in holistic medicine, let alone like traditional medicine. It's using very advanced technology that I think it needs further research. I've seen it work. The reason I even got into the cyber scan is because it worked with me and with my wife, because the cyber scan also makes remedies that are imprinted. I'll show you one of the cards. You can imprint the remedies onto a magnetic strip that are gained from the biofeedback. And
so basically, like homeopathy.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's basically a homeopathy machine.
It is, but not in the traditional sense. Okay. Instead of using substances, because homeopathy uses substances that are diluted to the point that they don't exist in the fluid, the cyber scan is directly testing the energetics of the person's body through the scan from the scalar wave. Now, the reason they actually developed the cyber scan is because in Germany, they were using these bowl devices. I don't know if you're familiar with bowl, where they would do testing, electromagnetic testing of the meridian points on the finger. That's a testing device that was developed in the 50s and 60s in Germany. And they used those for decades, but and they would use those to test different substances, homeopathy, as well as herbal remedies. And they use that as a testing device.
Right. And I've seen those at work, and I've seen them get good results.
Yeah. So those are fantastic tools, but there were a couple of more downsides with that technology. One being practitioner dependent error. So that depending on how the practitioner would use it, it could vary the results. That was one factor. The other factor is you're using electromagnetic energy, which will affect the meridian. Okay. Because you're introducing an outside energy source. So now the body is not being tested in the most neutral format that you could test it in. So what they theorize is if you could test the body with a non-EMF wave, meaning a scalar wave, you could get a much more accurate and detailed reading of that person. And so that's how they developed this system. Yeah. So
interesting. So I'm now looking at scalar waves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've got some really interesting things here. Unlike conventional electromagnetic waves, scalar waves are believed to be non-Hertzian, meaning they do not travel through space and time in the same way as traditional electromagnetic waves. Scalar waves are often described as standing waves, meaning they do not move through space, but exist as stationary patterns in space. And then I go a bit deeper. Scalar waves, in other words, describe the flow and movement of energy in space. Scalar waves, also known as longitudinal waves, were theorized by James Maxwell and proven by Nikola Tesla, earning them the name Tesla waves. So it seems that they're the same as the Tesla waves.
Yeah.
And then this is interesting.
Yeah.
Scalar waves are superluminal, which means that they move faster than the speed of light because they're unbounded by the limitations of three-dimensional space. Also, since they don't exist in the third dimension in the way that matter does, they move through the empty spaces between all matter.
Yeah.
I'm not
No. You know, I'm still just blown away by what.
Right. And I guess it's because of this that Nikola Tesla discovered that with these waves that you can do you can generate electricity or energy without losing energy, without entropy, because it's not traveling through three-dimensional time and space, therefore encountering resistance. So
Right.
it doesn't lose its power.
So they've somehow figured out how to use these waves to measure the body. That part, the part that's still to me to this day, I don't understand how it does it.
Right, because Nikola Tesla wanted to use it to give wireless energy transmission, and he was poised to do that. And his backer was JP Morgan Chase Bank, who then pulled out and wouldn't.
Well, when he found out he wanted to give it away for free,
right, because he couldn't match any money off it, so he went with oil and gas instead.
Yeah. So anyway, they somehow figured out how to make a medical use out of this thing.
Interesting.
I really think it should be in every hospital in the world, just because what I've seen with it'll pick up things that it's almost impossible for any other way of testing the body, even including, every kind of functional test you can imagine. The cyber scan will pick things up. It just does. I to this day am flabbergasted at how it can do that. But I've tested people that are very up there in the genetic realm. They do genetic testing and everything. And I've tested those people and I tell them the results and they're literally like, dude, you just told me everything that I know that's going on with me, that it took me a month to get the results from my genetic. We're talking about the top people in the world that do this.
Yeah, it's
blowing devil.
So there've been studies, it seems, showing that scalar waves may play a role in promoting cellular repair, enhancing DNA function, and supporting the body's natural healing.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's extremely fascinating stuff. I'm blown away by it.
It makes the fact that it's a Tesla wave, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because what was it Tesla said? If you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Yeah.
Frequency and vibration. And all these methodologies you're talking about come down to various forms of frequency and vibration.
It's all about frequency.
Even if it's not necessarily electromagnetic, some of them are, some of them aren't. Yeah. And yes, we need the electromagnetic ones, but it seems there are other ones we need as well. Yeah. Isn't it fascinating to be alive on the planet at a time when this stuff is suddenly emerging into the mainstream? Because I've been using, say, a Scalar for over 20 years, and the Beamer for at least 10. Yeah. But I would say that when someone first showed me a Scalar, I totally poo-pooed it. And despite the fact that I spent lots of time observing shamanic healings in the Kalahari and that sort of thing. But of course, that's different because that's ancient culture. And so, and anyway, it's happening in front of your eyes. So you see it happen. You can't deny that person gets up and walks away who couldn't before or whatever. But I went to Honduras on an assignment, a journalistic assignment, and I got bitten by a spider. And it was probably a brown recluse, but my face swelled up and the lump just kind of wouldn't go away. Just kind of was this big lump on the side of my face from the spider. And, I kind of thought, I've been in Africa a lot. It'll go away. It'll go away, and then it stopped going away. And finally, my friend had the scanner. I said, why don't you let me try the scanner on it? I'm like, well, okay, fine. 2 days, it was gone.
It was just your first time being exposed?
Yeah. And I was like, all right, maybe there's something in this.
I met the Russian doctor who brought the scanner to this country, but it was like about 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was.
They
Were using it, behind the Iron Curtain to enhance athletic performance and that heal their athletes and that sort of thing.
But she came here, like I was among the group of the first physician that got training in the scanner. Like it was probably 25 years ago.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
And I must have been. Yeah, it was about that. I think I was first exposed to it in about 2001 or 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always forget that was 25 years ago. I think it was.
Well, but now there's
Last
very
week.
low cost. I don't know if you're aware of it, but they have scanner units now. They're called DDoS. It's a different company, but it's by the original inventor of Scalar. He created another company called DDoS. And those units are consumer friendly, and they're only, you can buy them in this country for like $350. They're very cheap now.
Oh, right, because the scanner is expensive, right? Yeah.
The original scanners are thousands of dollars.
And even the handheld devices, like 850. Yeah.
Yeah. But now the DDoS units are as little as $350. So they're very easy to get.
I'm just looking them up now. Okay. So if people were wanting to learn more about this, I mean, obviously you're sitting in Los Angeles, and if people want to go to your clinic, they can, and we'll certainly, have you tell people how they can do that. But the vast majority of our listeners are not in Los Angeles. They're all over the place. So if they were wanting to get some advice on some of these things, and orient themselves, I'm sure some people have been taking notes through this podcast, and other people will do what I do when there's interesting stuff on podcasts, go back and re-listen to it and write that bit down that you forgot. But can they contact you, and can you help orient them?
They
can then find something in their hood where they are.
Yeah, our website, THUHeal, THUHEAL.com.
THU Heal, HEAL.com.
Transformational Healing Universe.com.
T, not P.
Yeah. THUHEAL.
Tea, a drink with tea. What's in do re mi? Tea. A drink with jam and bread. So tea, a drink, H
and then U,
and then
heal. Or heal.
.com.
.com. And we have an Instagram that's the same. That's just THU Heal.
Okay.
On Instagram. Yeah.
And do you consult with people? Do you give people advice who are, in Rotherham, Northern England, or Queens?
So I have patients that come from all over the world. I have a guy here right now that we've been treating for he's here for 40 days. He ended up with a glioblastoma in his brain. He's from Canada, actually. And he's been here for an entire month, treating 8 hours a day. With cases like that, we'll treat the patient literally 8 hours a day.
But for people who can't get to you, but need advice about where they could look for certain types of device and technology in their area, can you or help orient them a bit?
Sure. Yeah, they can contact us through either the website or the Instagram.
Super.
Yeah.
That's great. And then you're also, of course, using yoga in your practice. Would you say everybody should have kind of a yoga practice?
Yeah, definitely.
Can I do my little devil's advocate qualifier? It's always been in the back of my mind about yoga, which is that I used to have a very good yoga practice years ago. And then I could totally let it slide because I became a parent.
Mhm.
And also I'm so active with horses, and there's no question I felt great.
Mhm.
However, you know, and I know that yoga was something in ancient India and modern India for the wealthy classes who have the leisure to sit around and needing to move their bodies with yoga. And that the blokes that you see out there breaking stones on the road and carrying stuff around on their heads through the traffic in Bob, they're not doing yoga because they got no time to do yoga, you know?
Well, okay,
Yeah.
let me just say that there's a reason I do Kundalini yoga. I don't know.
Okay.
Most people don't know this, but Kundalini yoga was designed for the householder person, just exactly what you're saying.
Right.
People who have busy lives, who have kids, who are working. I'm the same way. I work 10, 12 hours a day. I don't have a whole lot of time.
Right. Because, my yoga practice was like the yoga practice of like a young man who's not a parent yet. And it's like out the window.
The thing is, like, but the Kundalini, my Kundalini practice consists of 3 to 11 minutes of yoga a day. And that's actually enough if you're doing the right movements and breathing patterns and stuff, where you can regulate your entire physiology in 3 to 11.
Because I am a great believer, I'm playing devil's advocate. I do believe in it. And I do know that also if you are leading a normal life, which is a very sedentary life, and you have to go from house to car or house to train to work to back end, or even now these days with home office, because people are still expecting you to be sitting there available on Zoom for the same number of hours, if not more, than you ever. So you're still sitting, just without the travel. Can you advise people? We haven't time to go into it now in this particular podcast, but can you help advise people when they contact you on how to get together a small yoga practice that would enhance, so they're not just dependent on these devices and machines that also
100%. I mean, my wife's a Kundalini yoga teacher, as I am too, but she specializes in that and can teach people either in groups or on Zoom or one-on-one. But Kundalini yoga is very easy to learn. It's very simple to do, and it's fun. That's the thing about, like, whatever activity you're doing for health or wellness, if it's not fun, then you shouldn't do it.
Yeah,
It's not gonna be fun.
I so agree.
I
so
mean,
agree.
if you're gonna sustain any practice at all, it better have some element of fun.
Yeah, I can't exercise unless it feels like I'm just having a laugh. Then I can do it all day. Like I can dance all night, and I'll happily climb that mountain, and I'll ride, train horses all day. But ask me to go to the gym, and I'm so bored within 3. Now I know some people absolutely adore the gym. It's a different temperament, different personality type. But for me, as you say, if it doesn't involve play, I'm not there. Yeah. And I think that's a nice note to end on, which is that play, I think, really is so important. What's the age old cliche, but it's a true one. We don't stop playing because we get old. We get old because we stop playing. Yeah.
100%. This whole conversation, be like a kid, connect with nature, and heal yourself with fun. I don't know who Norman Cousins.
Words to live by.
You know Norman Cousins. You know who that is?
No, I don't. Tell me.
Well, you should do it after we go offline. But Norman Cousins was a very famous. I think he was a writer or famous guy. Bottom line is he got a terminal diagnosis. They said, okay, you're not going to live. And so what he did to heal himself is he said, okay, I'm going to watch a comedy every day, like a comedy movie, TV show, whatever, every day for like a month, right? From his hospital bed. In 1 month, he was completely cured just from laughing every day.
And he lived to be 85. I'm looking him up now.
I mean, that's the ultimate, and that was with no yoga, no technology. That was just by laughing.
I think that's a podcast we got to do. Is laugh therapy is coming up.
Yeah.
Oh God, that will be fun. Let's do that. I'll go and do that one.
Yeah.
All right. Brilliant.
Awesome. It was
well, Har Hari, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Maybe we'll do it again.
Okay.
All right,
You
man.
ever
And I'll
come to
look
the
it up when I'm in
States?
Los Angeles. I get there from time to time.
Yeah, well, it'd be fun to hang out with you.
Do it. Okay. Only if well, maybe we're in a little bit of fun, maybe. Yeah. All right. Be well until the next time.
Okay. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you did, please help us to make more. Please like, subscribe, tell a friend, give us a thumbs up. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, please go to my website, rupertisaacson.com. And if you'd like to find out about our certification courses with autism, education, horsemanship, everyday shamanism, there's a whole range of cool stuff. Putting a show together like this is not an easy task. If you'd like to support us, please consider going to our Patreon page and showing us some love there. Even the smallest donation, it really helps us to keep the good content coming. So go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. Not to mention our excellent merch. Please go to our shop and check out some of our really cool rock and roll themed merch, t-shirts, hoodies, all that sort of thing. rupertisaacson.com, it's all there. I can't wait for our next guest and also to meet you there. In the meantime, remember, live free, ride free.